In The Young and the Restless. There are moments when the illusion of control shatters so quietly that no one notices the crack until it has already split everything apart. And for Sally Spectra, that fracture begins not with a scream or a scandal, but with silence so suffocating it feels like the world itself is holding its breath alongside her. The waiting room becomes a psychological prison, where every second stretches into a confrontation with a version of herself she has spent years outrunning. A version that is no longer defined by ambition, manipulation, or survival, but by something far more terrifying. Uncertainty that cannot be negotiated, outplayed, or controlled. The possibility that the test results may confirm a tumor does not simply threaten her physical health. It threatens the entire identity she has constructed in a city where strength is currency and vulnerability is a liability that others exploit without hesitation. Sally's mind becomes a battlefield of contradictions, where fear and defiance collide in relentless waves, each one more intense than the last. She recalls every moment she clawed her way up from being underestimated. Every calculated risk that allowed her to stand among people who once dismissed her as disposable, and now, in the cruelest twist, none of that experience prepares her for this. This is not a rival she can outmaneuver, not a scandal she can spin, not a betrayal she can anticipate. This is something internal, something invisible. Something that forces her to confront the horrifying possibility that control has always been an illusion she needed to survive. And that realization ignites a quiet rage within her, a refusal to accept that her story could be rewritten by something she cannot even see. As the tension builds, Sally begins to spiral into a deeper psychological conflict, one that exposes the fragile line between strength and denial. She tells herself she is preparing for the worst, but in reality, she is constructing emotional armor to avoid confronting the possibility that she may not be able to fight this the way she has fought everything else. The thought of weakness is more terrifying to her than the illness itself, because weakness invites pity. And pity is something Sally has always rejected with fierce determination. Yet beneath that resistance lies a growing awareness that isolation may no longer be a choice she can afford. And that realization unsettles her more than any diagnosis ever could. At the same time, the world of Genoa City continues to move with its usual intensity. Unaware that Sally stands on the edge of a personal crisis that could alter everything. The corporate rivalries, the fragile alliances, the quiet betrayals unfolding in boardrooms and private conversations all begin to take on a different meaning as Sally views them through the lens of her potential condition. What once felt like urgent battles now seem almost trivial, yet paradoxically, they also become more dangerous. Because if her vulnerability is exposed, those same conflicts could turn lethal in a social sense, stripping her of the power she has fought so hard to claim. She imagines the whispers, the subtle shifts in perception, the way people might begin to see her not as a force, but as a liability. And that fear fuels her determination to maintain control at all costs. This internal pressure begins to manifest in increasingly volatile ways, as Sally's behavior grows sharper, more defensive, more unpredictable. Every interaction becomes a calculated performance, every expression carefully controlled to avoid revealing the storm beneath the surface. But the effort to maintain that facade only deepens her exhaustion, creating a cycle where the more she tries to appear strong, the more fragile she feels inside. The absence of certainty becomes its own kind of torment, forcing her to exist in a state of suspended reality where every outcome feels equally possible and equally devastating. As she waits for the results, Sally begins to confront memories she has long buried, moments of loss, rejection, and fear that she transformed into motivation but never truly processed. The possibility of a tumor forces those memories back into the light, stripping away the protective layers she has built over time and exposing the raw vulnerability beneath. She realizes that her drive to succeed was never just about ambition, but about proving that she could not be broken, that she could rise above anything life threw at her. And now, faced with something that may not be conquerable through sheer will, she is forced to question whether that belief was ever realistic, or simply necessary for survival. Meanwhile, subtle shifts begin to ripple through her relationships, as those closest to her sense that something is wrong even if they cannot identify it.
Sally's attempts to maintain distance only heighten their concern, creating tension that threatens to unravel connections she has spent years navigating. The idea of letting someone in, of allowing herself to be seen in a moment of potential weakness, becomes both a terrifying risk and a desperate need. And that contradiction pulls her in opposing directions with increasing intensity. She finds herself questioning not only who she can trust, but whether she deserves to be supported at all. A thought that reveals just how deeply her past has shaped her perception of herself. The longer the wait continues, the more Sally's thoughts begin to darken, exploring scenarios she once would have dismissed as impossible. She imagines the impact of a confirmed diagnosis, not just on her own life, but on the intricate web of relationships and power dynamics that define her place in Genoa City. She considers the possibility of losing everything she has built, of becoming a cautionary tale rather than a success story. And that fear begins to morph into something more dangerous, a willingness to take extreme measures to protect her position, regardless of the cost. In this state, the line between survival and self-destruction becomes increasingly blurred. As Sally contemplates decisions that could have irreversible consequences. And yet, within this darkness, there is also a flicker of something unexpected. A quiet recognition that her obsession with control may have come at the expense of something equally important: connection. The possibility of losing her health forces her to re-evaluate what truly matters, challenging the priorities that have guided her for so long. She begins to question whether the battles she has fought were worth the isolation they created, and whether there is still time to redefine what strength means to her. This realization does not come as a moment of clarity, but as a slow, painful process of confronting truths she has avoided, each one chipping away at the persona she has carefully maintained. By the time the results are finally within reach, Sally is no longer the same woman who walked into that clinic. The waiting has transformed her, exposing layers of fear, anger, and vulnerability that she can no longer ignore. Regardless of what the diagnosis reveals, the real conflict has already taken root within her. A struggle between the need to control and the necessity of surrender, between the identity she has built and the reality she must now face. And in that moment, as the truth stands just beyond her grasp, the question that lingers is not simply whether she is sick, but whether she is ready to confront a version of herself that is defined not by her ability to fight, but by her willingness to endure, to change, and to accept that even the strongest personas can fracture under the weight of something they were never meant to carry alone.